All right, again, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might join us from, to this session at our fifth Women Transforming Technology Conference. My name is Alexa Tambellini, and I am part of the diversity and inclusion team here at VMware. I now have the great pleasure to introduce Nataly Kogan, who is one of the global leading experts in optimizing your emotional health and elevating your leadership. Back in March, we actually had her host a webinar for our employees on the topic of how to boost your emotional health skills during uncertainty. And we are thrilled to have her back at today's conference. Nataly is the creator of the Happier Method. She's the founder and CEO of Happier and the author of the book Happier Now, which was published in 2018. By the age of 37, Nataly held top positions at McKinsey and Microsoft. She was a managing director at a venture capital fund and started or was a member of the senior team at 5 startups and tech companies. But all of this overachievement came at a huge cost of stress and overwhelm, which was the catalyst for Nataly to give it all up and start her own company, Happier, with a mission to help millions of people thrive in work and life by improving emotional health with science-backed skills and practices. With that, I want to turn it over to Nataly to share some of her story and insights on how we can improve our emotional health while we are all currently in a place that is challenging and full of uncertainty.
Thank you so much, Alexa, for that wonderful intro. And thank you so much for all of you who are taking time out of your day to join us. I'm really grateful that you're taking some time for yourself, especially during this really difficult and overwhelming time. And I know many of us wish we were in person, but this is as close as we can get. So I just start with my gratitude and a big virtual hug for all of you. I feel like we can all use a lot of virtual hugs these days. So just a quick housekeeping thing, and then I'll dive in. We are going to do questions at the end. We're actually going to leave a bunch of time for questions because I want to make sure I get to answer your questions. So you can ask a question at any time. If you would please put it in the Q&A. My colleague Debbie is going to help to facilitate the Q&A, but you can ask it in Q&A at any time. We'll be sharing some links and contact information as we go along. So just as a heads up. I want to, it's been interesting for me as I've been doing talks and sessions during this time, because I've been talking a lot about emotional health skills to help us get through this really uncertain time. And my point of reference for that is my experience when I was a teenager, when I came to the United States as a refugee. And as you might imagine, that is a really tough experience that is filled with uncertainty. I grew up in the former Soviet Union. And when I was 13 years old, my parents and I left everything and everyone we knew behind to try and make our way to the US as refugees. And we spent a couple months in refugee settlements in Austria and then in Italy applying for permission to come to the US. And as a teenager, I think you don't want to move across the street. In fact, I have one. My 15-year-old daughter is at home in that room right there. And I know at that age, we don't want to move across the street, right? And for me, my whole world as I knew it slipped from under my feet. My whole identity as I knew it was changed and was challenged. And that's been a reference point for me as I've been going through this difficult time of just thinking about what can help us when we feel a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, because those were all the things that I felt. If you can imagine, I spoke almost no English, and I went to 8th grade, and I always say this, do you remember how compassionate and kind we are in 8th grade? I can envision all of your faces, and I hope everyone's shaking their head like this. We are not very compassionate people in 8th grade, and here I was, with my, whatever English I did speak came out of my mouth with this terrible accent, and everybody made fun of me. And I had 2 outfits to my name because that's what we got from the donation pile of clothes. And so it was a really anxiety-filled time for me. I remember just feeling overwhelmed with just feelings of I just didn't know how it would ever be better, and everything was uncertain. And I've been thinking a lot about that time, and it's so similar in some way to what we're all going through right now, because we are in incredibly uncertain times. We are facing, all of us, so much fear, so much sadness, so much sense of loss and stress and overwhelm. And it can really be debilitating. I can tell you, I have had moments in the last several weeks. I live outside of Boston. We've been on lockdown for 6 weeks. And it's been really challenging. And so what I want to do today is I want to offer to you some really tangible skills and practices to help you make it through the storm with a little bit less stress, hopefully with a little bit more ease, because to me, this is kind of the analogy that I've been using, that we are in a storm and we have to make it through. And these are, these emotional health skills, I've been teaching them for years, but to be honest with you, I feel like I've spent my whole life preparing for this moment. Like I've spent my whole life to be in a place where I feel like I can help people, help all of you awesome humans out there on this other side of Zoom. And so it's incredibly meaningful for you. This is my bigger why, to share these skills with you. And before I dive in, one of the things that I want to encourage you to think about, and this was a huge shift for me on my journey, is to think of your emotional health as a skill. To think of your well-being not as a place you get to, not as something that just happens that to lucky people, not as something that you have to wait to experience when everything is perfect, because it never is, but as something that you practice every day. And for me on my journey, Alexa was reading my bio, I did figure out how to learn to speak English, as you can tell. I actually must share this funny story because I feel like we all need a little humor these days. My hero, when I was living in the projects outside of Detroit, which is where we lived, we came to America. My hero was Alyssa Milano, who played a character of Sam on Who's the Boss. Okay, since I cannot see your beautiful faces, can I just see some people in chat tell me that you know the show Who is the Boss, please? Because I cannot tell you how many times I've shared. Oh my God, thank you all, thank you all. I love you all so much. Thank you, oh thank God. This makes my day, okay? Thank you, because I cannot tell you how many times it's happened to me where I'll say this like, oh, remember the show Who's the Boss? And it's like a younger millennial audience and they're all going, huh? And then like inevitably there's one person, they like look at their phone or something, they're like, oh yeah, it's that show my mom used to watch. Okay, so yeah. Makes me feel really great. So yes, Tony Danza too. So I would come home from school, from Scarlett Middle School. We lived in the projects in a town called Ypsilanti, about half an hour from Detroit. And I had no friends, obviously. And I would sit there and I'd grab a box of Rice Krispies cereal. For some reason, we always got Rice Krispies in the donation food that we got. And it was heavenly, by the way, because in Russia we had no dry cereal. So I'd get the Rice Krispies and I would sit there, and Who's the Boss was on at 3:30, and then there was Charles in Charge, and then there was Who's the Boss again. And all of a sudden I met this happy teenager, Sam, and she had these high top Jordache hot pink sneakers, and she spoke perfect English. And at that moment, she became my hero, because I figured if I could just speak English like Alyssa Milano on Who's the Boss, everything would be amazing. So I don't know, you guys, you judged, am I sounding like Alyssa Milano? I don't know, but I can tell you it was a highlight of my life when people stopped making fun of my English. And so I did come out of that place of feeling overwhelmed. And the way that I did that was I figured that if I could just work really hard and I could achieve a lot of things and I would become successful and I would take care of my family, then everything would be okay. That was how I dealt with uncertainty at that time. That is how I chose to deal with my overwhelm, is I thought I could just make everything perfect in my life. And then I thought I could get to this place called happiness and I would feel good all the time. And for 20 years, that's what I did. I was the ultimate overachiever. This word grit, like I didn't know it, but I embraced it. I worked so hard. I never took breaks. I never allowed myself. I was having this conversation with someone recently. I don't think I ever had a day between jobs. Like I was one of those people who like I'd be finishing a job and starting another job. Sometimes I'd be doing two things at the same time. And the thing is, I am to this day, I am so proud of everything I achieved. I mean, given where I come from. But every time I achieved something, like I did feel happy for a little while, and then the bubble would just burst. And I again felt those feelings of anxiety and stress, and am I good enough? And so my answer was work harder, take less breaks, push myself more, because I really thought that well-being and happiness and emotional health were these states of being you achieved your way into, that eventually I could make everything in my life just so that I would feel good all the time. And well, after 20 years of doing that, after 20 years of treating myself almost like a, like a military sergeant, never ever allowing myself to actually treat myself as a human, to accept what I was feeling, or to treat myself with compassion, I suffered complete burnout and complete breakdown. It was the absolute darkest time in my life. I share the whole story in my book, Happier Now. So for details, please refer to Happier Now, because I want to dive into the skills. But it was a really, really scary time. I really thought that I was going to lose everything that mattered to me, my life, my family, my company, my career. And, but I didn't want to give up, as scary as it was, as uncertain as it was. And I went on a journey of learning to live in a different way. I went on a journey of learning how to do the work that I love, but do it from a place that fuels me. And I went on a journey of learning that emotional health is a skill that I could learn, and that having those skills can actually be my toolkit through all the different storms that life will throw me into. And this is, again, why I'm here, because the skills that I learned from both research and trial and error, and at this point, having taught them to hundreds of thousands of people, it's not that they've made me a person who always feels amazing, because that really is impossible. But what I have gained is what I want to share with you is a toolkit of practices that help me get through incredibly challenging times like we're in now. And so with that frame of your emotional health as a skill versus a destination, and it is something that you can practice starting right now, and that now, as we're going through this really challenging time, I think it is not just important to do, but it is your responsibility to practice your emotional health skills, not just for yourself, but for all the human beings in your life that you care about. I want to share a couple of those skills with you today. And I want to start with a skill that I call acceptance. Here's a caveat on acceptance. It is perhaps the hardest skill, but it is also life-changing. So that's the small text, that's the asterisk. So what is acceptance? I used to hate that word. When I used to hear it, it felt really passive, like whatever happens, happens, accept life as it is. Like all of that was way woo-woo for me. And so that was because I really didn't understand it. So the way that I define acceptance is a skill of learning how to look at how things are and how you feel with clarity instead of judgment. And then using that as your starting point to say, what is the next best thing I can do? So I'm going to unpack that a little bit. What does it mean to look at how things are with clarity instead of judgment? Well, judgment is anytime you hear should. Should is your shorthand for judgment. So the minute you hear the should, this is not how it should be, this person is not how they should be, I am not how I should be, that's your shorthand. You're now in judgment. And the thing that I want you to take away is not that you should like everything, right? We are now in a situation where so many things in our lives are not like they should be, right? We should not be in a pandemic. We should not be juggling, taking care of our kids and trying to work. We should not have to worry about the health and lives of our loved ones, right? So acceptance is not about liking something or disliking. Those are actually parts of judgment. It's about coming out of the should and looking at things as a more neutral witness. It's about separating the facts from our judgment of the facts, or from a dramatic story that maybe our brain has created about the facts. And something that I realized about myself when I was learning the skill is I spent so much of my life being stuck in what I call the valley of suffering. The valley of suffering is the distance between how something is and how we've decided it should be. In between is the valley of suffering. And the only thing that happens when we're stuck in the should, this is not how it should be, this person is not how it should be, this should not be going on. The only thing that happens is we waste our precious emotional and mental energy. That is the only thing. Being stuck in that headspace does not change the situation. It does not help us get through it. It wastes our emotional energy. And so that's why practicing that first step of acceptance, of just being a more of a neutral witness, of saying, this is how things are. And part of that is witnessing how you feel with the same clarity. This is how I feel. Not, I shouldn't feel this way, or creating a big story about why I shouldn't feel this way, but just witnessing and acknowledging your feelings. And one of the hardest ways to practice acceptance, and perhaps the most important, is learning to witness and acknowledge and experience your difficult feelings. Especially right now. I mean, think of all the challenging feelings we're all experiencing. Sense of loss and grief and overwhelm and stress and fear and so much more. And of course, they're unpleasant. Of course, it is more fun to feel joy or fun or excitement. But as human beings, we're actually meant to experience a variety of emotions. And research shows that when we allow ourselves to feel the difficult feelings without running away from them or trying to stuff them down, that we actually feel them for a shorter amount of time, and we feel them with less intensity. And that is because when, just to geek out on the science a little bit with you guys, so when you experience an emotion, it comes from the amygdala. This is the oldest part of our brain. It's in the back of our brain. You might have heard it referred to the reptile brain. This is the part of our brain that controls emotions. So when you feel a feeling, it's coming from the amygdala. And you know how you can feel like consumed by a difficult feeling, like consumed by overwhelm or consumed by stress? Well, that's your amygdala at work. When you allow yourself to really just acknowledge to yourself how you're feeling, how do you acknowledge? You say it to yourself, maybe you journal about it, maybe you share it with a friend. But when you actually acknowledge, like, I feel sad right now. I feel really sad that I'm really missing being on stage and seeing all of the beautiful faces of the audience, right? I feel sad about that. This is truly what I feel. When you take the moment to acknowledge your difficult feeling, you're engaging the frontal cortex, the part of our brain that is more analytical, more thoughtful, and it helps us to not be so consumed by our feeling, but to create a little bit of that distance. We are able to witness it. And when we're able to witness our difficult emotions, we feel them with less intensity. We're not as consumed, and we're able to then move to that next step of acceptance, which is, given how I feel, given how things are, what is the next best thing I can do to honor this moment? What is the next best thing I can do to serve myself, to serve maybe my team, my family, to serve the situation? And notice I didn't say, how do I fix all things and make everything perfect? Okay, any other recovering perfectionists over here? Hi, I'm Natalie, and I used to think if I tried really, really, really hard, I could fix all the things, okay? I think there's so many of us who are in that boat. That is not the practice. The practice is, the first step is to see things clearly, including acknowledging your feelings, and then ask yourself, what is one small thing that you can do to honor yourself, to shift maybe how you feel, to honor the others involved? And there's so much power in that one step, because our brain loves progress. Our brain loves positive momentum. And when you identify that one step, when you take that one step, your brain will think of more, and you will feel a little bit of release. That feeling, that should, will release a little bit, and you will find more ways to move forward. And so those are the two steps of acceptance. And by the way, we have a resource page that we'll be sharing in a little bit, where we have a lot more on all the things I'm talking about, so you don't have to take feverish notes. And I really encourage you, I think right now, it is so easy for us to get stuck in the should. It is so easy to get stuck in the valley of suffering because we have so many challenges. So I really encourage you to commit to practicing these two steps of acceptance. And it's not a do it and forget it. It's dozens times a day. As you catch yourself being in the should, or as you catch yourself being stuck in the valley of suffering, to ask yourself, okay, how am I feeling? Can I witness that? Can I acknowledge it? Let me see the situation with clarity. What are the facts versus what is the story? And then can you identify that one small thing that you can do to honor this moment. And it is incredibly powerful to practice acceptance for yourself, but it is also incredibly powerful to practice it with other people. And I can tell you that since the virus broke out, we've been doing dozens and dozens of these kinds of virtual sessions for leaders, for teams, for companies. We've been doing dozens of these sessions pro bono for medical staff at different hospitals just to support them. And the number one question that I've been getting is, how do I help my children through this crisis? Or how do I help my team who's feeling down? Or how do I help my partner who's really struggling? And the answer is acceptance. Because the thing is, and I know I already saw someone mention, I know there's probably a lot of parents in the audience who are listening. So I'll just use parents as an example, because for me, my daughter Mia, as I mentioned, she's 15. I've had a lot of sadness for her missing school and not being with her friends. And it's hard, it's really hard. And I think when someone we care about is struggling, our first instinct is to fix it for them or to cheer them up, right? Like that's my first instinct as a parent. When I see Mia sad, like what I really want to do is like cheer her up, right? But there's a step before that. There's this really powerful thing that we can do for anyone in our life who might be struggling. And that is to practice acceptance of their difficult feelings. And that is to let them know that it's okay to not feel okay, that they don't need to change right away, to not put pressure on them to change. And I cannot tell you how powerful it is to validate someone's emotion. By the way, when you validate someone's emotion, you're not saying you're agreeing with it. You're simply saying, I understand how you are feeling. And I understand that you're feeling this right now, and that is okay. It is incredibly powerful to practice it. And so I really encourage you with people in your life, again, your kids, your partners, your friends, your loved ones, people you work with, people you manage, if they are struggling or just feeling stressed, can you practice that acceptance? Can you help them acknowledge their feelings by acknowledging that it's okay to not be okay? And can you allow that space for them to truly be there with their feelings, and then in a compassionate way, guide them, help them to identify what is that one thing that they can do to maybe shift how they feel, to honor the situation. And again, to not fix all the things, but to identify that one thing. And as a mom, I can tell you that this is one of the most impactful things that I have learned as a parent. It is really hard. When you see your kid be sad, you really just want to cheer them up. And sometimes that's what I do, okay? This is a skill, which means we practice, which means we don't always get it right. But I cannot tell you how powerful it is. And I've witnessed this with my daughter. I've witnessed this with friends, with my loved ones, with people I work with, to give people permission to not feel okay, to just accept how they feel. And in doing that, we help them to have clarity around the feelings and actually find a way to shift. And so this is the practice and the skill of acceptance that I really encourage you to practice, especially as we are in this really incredibly difficult time. So the other skill and practice that I want to talk about today is gratitude. And I actually want to tell you a little quick story that I've been thinking about a lot these days. So when we were in the refugee camp, the first was in Vienna in Austria. Sounds so fabulous, doesn't it? Like, oh, we're in Vienna, but we had no money. It was really tough. We had a lot of uncertainty. We had no idea like when we would get to the US. And my father, who's my hero, at night, he's a double PhD. He's like one of those crazy, brilliant Russian scientists. But at night there, he got a job making, I think, like $2 for the whole night, unloading crates at a local food market just to make a few extra dollars for food. And one morning he came in, my mom and he and I shared this little room, and he walked in, he was like all smelly. It was like 6 a.m. He said, "Girls, get up. Today we're going to see the Vienna Opera House. It's beautiful and they have free tours." And my mom was like, "Sure." And I was like, "You are crazy. Okay. We have no money. We're in this disgusting place. We have no idea when we'll even get to the US, and you want to go sightseeing?" And I'll never forget what my dad said to me. He said, "You're absolutely right. Life is awful right now, but we have a choice. We can either sit here and wallow in the awful, or we can go do something as a family, enjoy a little moment of beauty together." Now, it's a job of a teenager to ignore her parents. So I absolutely ignored all this advice. And I did go with my parents because I had to, but I made sure I showed them how much I disagreed with this decision. In line at the Opera House, my father befriended this gentleman who offered to buy us ice cream afterwards. So here we are in Vienna on a beautiful sunny day with ice cream. Like, we didn't have enough money for food, and all of a sudden we're at a cafe enjoying ice cream. And there's a picture of us from that day, and everyone is smiling. And I cut my face out of it after we came to the US because my face was just suffering. Like, I did not let myself enjoy the moment, because back then I thought that when things are not okay, when things are not perfect, you do not enjoy a moment. You do not allow yourself to feel joy. You own the struggle. And so I wasn't going to, for a little moment, I wasn't going to let myself feel grateful for this act of kindness from this gentleman. And this lesson that my father tried to teach me, it took me 3 decades to learn it. It was 30 years this summer since we came to the US. And it is such a powerful lesson for these times, because nothing is perfect right now. Everything is challenging. All of us are encountering so many different struggles, and it can be easy to not feel any moment of joy. It can be easy to think that joy is frivolous, but it's actually the opposite. If we can, amidst the struggle, if we can recognize that happiness does not arise from making everything in our lives perfect, but rather happiness is about embracing our lives as they are, with all of the imperfections and the challenges. And then within that, practicing gratitude and kindness to feel those incredible moments of joy. That is our source of resilience. And so for me, like, I've been really drawing on what happened back then in Vienna to remind me these days to practice gratitude and to practice joy. And gratitude is very simply the skill of zooming in on what is good or kind or positive or loving in your life, and sharing your appreciation with other people. And gratitude is always powerful. There are more than 11,000 different studies that show that practicing gratitude and developing a grateful mindset is the most direct path to improving your well-being, to reducing anxiety, to sleeping better. But gratitude is also one of those things that I find that it's kind of like we all know it's good for us, and yet few people practice it daily. So I want to give you an analogy, okay? Gratitude is like broccoli. Okay, so we all know broccoli is good for us, right? It has a lot of nutrients, a lot of vitamins, but you only get those nutrients if you eat the broccoli. Knowing that broccoli is healthy does not give you the nutrients. You have to eat it. The same thing with gratitude. It's not enough to just know, like, oh yeah, I know gratitude is good for us. You have to practice it, and you have to practice it daily. And this is what I'm inviting you to overdo it on gratitude these days, because not only, as I mentioned, is it a powerful way to experience moments of joy amidst the challenge, but it is also an incredibly important source of resilience when you're going through a hard time. And here's why. So all of our brains have what's called a negativity bias, right? And what that means is that we are more sensitive to anything negative than we are to anything positive. Our brains have evolved this way to protect us from danger. I always say this, your brain's #1 job is not to make you happy. It is to help you survive. And so danger usually comes with negative stimuli, right? Think about it. You know, a car is coming at you, a lot of negative stimuli. And so your brain is very sensitive to it, so it can help protect you, right? So you can run away. But the challenge is that we're all so much more sensitive to negative stimuli that it's very easy to not feel the benefits of the good things in our lives because we're so over-focused on the negative. And especially right now, there are so many negative things. There are so many challenges, and there's so many negative news. So it is really easy to become completely overwhelmed with the stress and anxiety. And the help comes from practicing gratitude. Because when you practice gratitude, when you zoom in on really specific things that are good in your life, and the more specific, the better, you remind your brain that there is more to your life than the current challenge you're facing, that there is more to your life than the stress and the overwhelm and all the negative news. And that is a huge source of resilience. And so gratitude is even more important to practice when you're going through a challenging time, which is what we're all going through right now. And I want to offer you a really simple way to practice gratitude during challenging times. I call it gratitude antidote. And it goes like this. When you find yourself really stressed or really overwhelmed, can you take a pause? Can you acknowledge how you're feeling? Because acceptance is always first. And then can you use that as a reminder to practice gratitude? So the shorthand that I use is, okay, I'm really overwhelmed, but, and the but is your pause, but I'm really grateful for. And then you identify what you're grateful for. And when you're practicing gratitude, it is so important to be specific. You know, I often, when I do workshops and we do more interactive sessions, I'll ask people, like, share something you're grateful for. And folks say things like, you know, I'm grateful for my health or my family. Those are wonderful things, but they are too general for our brain to really capture. And so the more specific you can be, the better. Actually, I want to share inspiration. As I mentioned, we've been doing a lot of sessions, pro bono sessions for doctors and nurses. And I was in a conversation yesterday with a doctor who is in the ICU here at Mass General Hospital. It is the hospital outside of Boston that's been taking the most coronavirus patients. And this doctor it was his first day off in 29 days. He's been working in ICU with coronavirus patients. And we were talking about gratitude, and he said, you know, one of the best things one of our attending doctors does is before we go on rounds, and the rounds for coronavirus patients in the ICU, you can imagine how overwhelming they are. That attending, before they go in, he always says, I am going to share with you a moment of gratitude from my morning. And yesterday, the day we talked, his moment of gratitude was, I'm so grateful for good pressure in my shower. And the doctor who was telling me this, he was smiling. He said it was so wonderful because it was so small that it reminded all of us that there's so many good things in our lives, even as we're dealing with so much pain and so much disease and so much overwhelm. And like, it was a powerful reminder that when you practice gratitude, when you're doing your gratitude antidote, the more specific you can be, the better. And actually, I want, like, one analogy I want you to have is like being like a gratitude archaeologist, right? Like, you're really zooming in, you're really digging in to find those really small things that you're grateful for, because the small things are the big things. The small moments of gratitude, feeling appreciation for those everyday moments, that is so powerful. That becomes your fuel to keep going. And there's so many other ways to practice gratitude. One of the other practices I'd love to share is 3 gratitudes before your first email in the morning, or before reading your first news article. Again, it's really simple. So we all grab our phones in the morning. Let's just admit it. So before you open your email, before you read the news, can you jot down 3 things you're grateful for? Maybe it's in an email to a friend. We've had a lot of people tell us they've had gratitude buddies. They've created gratitude buddies after I share this practice. So someone sends 3 gratitudes, the other person replies. Maybe it's a gratitude to your family that you share. Maybe you share gratitudes with your team, again, being specific. And the reason I'm connecting 3 gratitudes before your first email or before your news article is because it's helpful when you're creating a new habit to connect it to something you're already doing. So since we're all checking our email in the morning and we're all reading the news, practicing gratitude right before will help you create a habit. It's also going to help you just center in your positive energy before the world takes over. I call gratitude as a really great primer for your brain. And finally, the other thing I really want to encourage you is to overdo it on sharing your gratitude with other people right now. You know, it's hard. We're all feeling more isolated. We're all feeling a lack of social connection. We all need it now more than ever. And one of the best ways that we can really connect with people right now, and we can remind people we care about that we appreciate them and they're valued, is by sharing our authentic gratitude with them. So I encourage you to send a daily gratitude email to someone. I encourage you to begin your team meetings with gratitude. We have this practice that we teach to teams. It's called gratitude bookends. Begin a meeting by sharing something you are grateful for, remembering to be specific, or someone you are grateful for, express gratitude to them, and then ask someone to do that at the end of the meeting. It's a wonderful way to weave in gratitude into the flow of your day, and it's easy to do virtually. But however you are sharing your gratitude, remember that the only thing required is that you genuinely feel it and that you are specific. So tell the person why you appreciate them. You don't have to write a lot or share a lot, but it is so powerful to feel acknowledged, to feel seen, to feel valued, to feel recognized. Again, particularly right now, I cannot tell you how many days I've had a really tough day. And then I'll open my inbox and there's an email from a reader of my book or someone who's been part of our sessions, and they tell me that something I share has been helpful to them and they appreciate it. I don't feel exhausted or stressed anymore. I feel all this energy. And that is the power of you sharing gratitude with someone. And so I encourage you to become a gratitude hero during this difficult time, and every day to overdo it on practicing your own gratitude and on sharing your gratitude with others. And so these are the skills I wanted to share with you: acceptance and gratitude. I definitely want to leave some time for questions, and I'm so excited that we have time for questions. So if you would please put your questions in Q&A, it just makes it easier for Debbie to see them and facilitate. And Debbie, my colleague, my awesome human colleague, is just going to help facilitate by asking me the questions, because it's really hard for me to read and then think. It's a skill I actually would like to acquire, but I don't have. So if you would please put your questions in Q&A, I'd love to answer as many of them as possible. And then we'll be sharing some links and resources for you guys as well. So Debbie, take it away.
Yes. Hi, Natalie. Thank you so much. That was just so fueling. And I want to start out by having you tell everyone a little bit more about the art behind you.
Oh, yes. Well, I love this question. And this is what I mean. I can't read. So I saw some comments, but so this art is all my art. I actually started painting 4 years ago when I was going through my burnout and my really hard time. And my teacher asked me to do something for myself once a week, which I thought was a ridiculous idea, because at the time I was very committed to being a martyr. And I thought that my emotional health didn't have anything to do with anything. And so I've always wanted to paint, and I never gave myself permission, because I thought it's not what I should be doing. I should be a professional and executive. I should really focus on that. And so I started to paint for joy, and now you can't stop me. And it brings me so much joy, and I love that it brings all of you joy. So all of the art behind me is my art. And if I may just offer a shameless plug, not for art, but for creativity. We do a free weekly webinar. We started doing these when the crisis began, on strengthening your well-being. We do it on Wednesdays at noon. Debbie will share a link in chat. You're all free to join us. It's every week. And tomorrow, the whole webinar, I'm doing a session on how creativity can be your fuel for self-care through the storm. So wanted to get that plug in, because it's, for me, it's how I practice self-care. Thank you, Debbie. So you can join us for the webinar every week, but tomorrow we're going to talk about creativity, and shh, don't tell anyone, there might be some live painting involved.
Thank you, Natalie. Okay, so you mentioned your burnout in relationship to your art, and so I want to jump to a question about that. After your burnout, what were the first things you did to start your emotional health journey?
That is an awesome question, and I will tell you there were 3 things, and I'm condensing the timeline, so it took me a while. I just want to be really open about that. It wasn't like one day I woke up and I said, I'm going to do these 3 things, but someone's asking, it's noon Eastern. I just saw that. Thank you, Debbie. So there were 3 things that I identified that I wanted to start committing to. And in fact, I call them my daily anchors, because when I was going through my burnout, I was in a storm. It was really terrifying. And I felt like I was this boat that was just, wherever the storm went, I went there. And so I created a set of daily anchors for myself that I was committed to doing every single day, no matter what. And in my book, in fact, I take you through how you create your own set of daily anchors using these different skills and practices. So here are my 3 daily anchors. First was gratitude practice. So every day, I still do this, begin with gratitude. I am a journaler. Obviously, I have a bright yellow journal, because obviously I love yellow. I gotta tell you guys, I always wear yellow when I speak. My book is yellow. kind of yellow overload over here, but it brings me joy, and I hope it brings you joy. But I have this yellow journal. Actually, it's I'm cheating. I'm using a journal. We have this program for women leaders called Elevating Women Leaders that we do throughout the year. And this is an Elevating Women Leaders journal that I love sharing with this awesome group of women. So I start with gratitude always. So that was my first daily anchor, gratitude practice. Write down 3 things I was grateful for. The second daily anchor was 5 to 10 minutes of stillness and silence. Meditation intimidated me. That word intimidated me. I was committed to this identity of myself as, oh, I could never get my thoughts to calm down. I really didn't understand meditation. So I just said every morning, and I still do this, just 5 to 10 minutes of just being still and silent. Sometimes close your eyes, maybe sometimes don't. It is still a daily anchor for me. It just helps for me to be present with myself, to check in with myself, to ask myself how I'm feeling, to just observe what is going on in my thoughts. So that was my second anchor. And the third anchor was to do something for self-care for myself. And the answer I came up with was either yoga or taking a daily walk. I still do both of those. I take a daily walk every day. It's perhaps the daily anchor that I do almost every day, like those 5 days in Boston in the middle of January, maybe when it's like bajillion degrees below zero and it's horizontal snow. Maybe I don't go outside, I do it on the treadmill, but I take a daily walk and it's kind of my zen. So those were the things that I started with. And then one of the hardest ones was practicing self-compassion. And we could spend a lot of time about self-compassion, but self-compassion is really the skill of being kinder to yourself, of treating yourself as you would a friend. And that took me a while, but that became also something that I practice daily.
Okay, Nataly, there's lots of questions about gratitude. And I'm going to just start with a quick one. What is one more of your favorite ways to practice gratitude daily?
So in fact, sorry, another plug. I have an audio program out. It's called Gratitude Daily. And it's an audio program. It's fantastic, if I may say so myself. It's 21 days and I teach you a different gratitude practice every day. So you can check that out. It's every day is a short lesson, 5 to 7 minutes. One of the other ways that I love practicing gratitude is with my family. And we have many, many different little rituals that we tried over time. The one that really works and we've stuck with is one is on Friday evenings, we have this glass jar and we have little sticky notes and we each write 3 good things about our week that we appreciate and we read them out loud and then we put them in. And every Monday, I begin my day by writing little gratitude notes to my husband and my daughter, and I put them on the kitchen counter so they see them before they come in for breakfast. And it just helps me to, you know, begin my week in a place of appreciation for my family. So those are 2 little rituals that you can try with your family, with your colleagues, with your friends.
Thank you, Nataly. Okay, so on the topic of gratitude, how do you share your gratitude without making others feel bad if they're in a different situation? So maybe maybe you're employed, but someone else isn't. Maybe someone has to go to work outside the home while you get to work from home.
It's a great question. You know, I've been getting this question a lot and people have been sharing that they feel guilty even to feel grateful for the blessings in their lives because so many people don't have those blessings, right? Like I am very lucky to be able to work from home, but all these doctors we've been doing sessions for, they all have to put themselves at risk every day. So I've also been hearing a related question of, you know, I feel really guilty to even feel grateful for what I have. And my answer is, and by the way, I just need to say, I'm an expert in guilt. I'm a Russian Jew. We are really amazing at guilt. I've grown up with like guilt was a value, like you were a good person if you felt guilty. So I really get the guilt. But here is the question that helps me. Is your guilt helpful? Is feeling guilty about the blessings in your life, is that helping anyone else? And the answer is no. And so if you find yourself in that place where you feel guilty about having blessings in your life, I want you to first just ask yourself this question: is feeling guilty helpful? And second, I want you to recognize that when you are sharing your authentic, genuine gratitude, which is very different from humble bragging, which is very different from showing off, and we all know the difference. When you genuinely share your deep gratitude for the blessings in your life, the only thing other people feel, even if people don't have those blessings, is that same sense of appreciation. Gratitude is contagious. Just like kindness is contagious, just like happiness is contagious. When you feel gratitude and it's genuine and you express it in a genuine way, the only outcome that is possible is the other person finds something in their life that they're grateful for, which could be different. I had this experience. Again, I was talking to, we were doing a session for doctors. It was a couple weeks ago. And I shared this on the webinar. I actually said that sometimes I feel guilty about being grateful that I am safe, that I can be at home. And I talked about this, and one of the doctors, she raised her hand and then she said, I don't want you to feel guilty, because if you are grateful for feeling safe, I feel really awesome, because part of your safety, I'm helping to create it, right? Because I'm a doctor and I'm out there battling and helping people. And then we got into this whole conversation of her sharing something she's grateful for. And she actually said, well, I'm actually really grateful to be able to be a doctor and that I can help people and that I don't feel helpless during this challenging time. And so when you share your authentic gratitude, the only outcome is that the other person will be reminded of something they are grateful for that may be very different. And so again, I love this question, and I'm grateful to have been able to answer it because it's been coming up so much. But as long as your gratitude is genuine, as long as you're sharing it just to be grateful, the only possible outcome is you're actually inviting and reminding the other person to find something that they are grateful for, which is a gift for their emotional health and well-being.
Okay, so before we move off of gratitude, I want to tell everybody that I'm posting the link to Gratitude Daily that Natalie mentioned in the chat.
Thank you, Debbie.
Yeah, so now on to our next question.
I have one more, Debbie, since we're taking a little break. So one more thing that I'd love everyone to do, speaking of gratitude. So I mentioned that we have a resource page for everyone, and there's a couple ways to get it. We have a link that we put in chat, but another way, if you don't feel like copying it right now, if you text the word gratitude to 66866, we will send you a link to the resource page so you don't have to remember the link. So all you have to do is text the word gratitude to 66866, and you'll get the link automatically, just to make your life easier.
Thank you, Natalie. Okay, so what do you say to yourself when you feel like your work isn't meaningful to the world right now?
It's a great question, because I actually shared this morning on Instagram and in the happier email. Again, actually, this is probably a good time. Debbie's going to share some links in chat of just how to stay connected. People ask, the best place to stay connected to me is on Instagram. I share daily how I'm practicing, how I'm stumbling. And I actually shared today that for me, my work and being able to help and my bigger why, my sense of purpose is the bridge of resilience. This is what is pulling me through this crisis, to be able to help. And so I know it can be challenging to feel like, well, my work is not relevant right now. But here is the thing. The bigger why, your sense of meaning, it is a skill, like acceptance, like gratitude. It is one of the 5 core emotional health skills that I teach. And it is really important to practice it. But the way that we practice this, so first, a definition. What does it mean to have a sense of meaning? We derive as human beings a sense of meaning when we connect something that we do, our strength, to how does it help someone else, to how does this contribute to someone else. That intersection is where your bigger why is. And the most powerful way to find your bigger why is not to think big, but to zoom and come back to the daily to-dos. And so I want to offer you this practice because I know there are parts of your work, and I don't know anything about you, but I know there are parts of your work that are meaningful because they are helping someone else. So here is the practice. I share this in my book. It's the practice I do daily. I call it a to-do list makeover. Here it is. You look at your to-do list. So look at your work tasks that you're doing today. Pick a couple and ask yourself, who does this help? And actually answer the question. It could be a colleague, could be your team. could be a partner, could be a colleague on a different team, could be your organization, could be the community, whatever that is the source of your meaning. And it is so important to recognize that, again, our sense of purpose comes when something we are doing contributes to someone else. It can be to any degree, and it doesn't really matter if that person is in our company or, you know, a partner of our company. But if you practice this to-do list makeover, you will uncover ways that your work is meaningful because your work is helping someone else.
Thank you. Okay, so here's one you're going to like a lot. After acknowledging a certain negative feeling that is overwhelming, you recommend accepting it and then thinking about things that we are grateful about. But is there anything else or other tips we should do about this negative feeling?
Yes, great question. So I would say perhaps one of the most challenging and, again, rewarding things that I've learned on my journey is the skill of accepting difficult feelings. And again, it is challenging. I just want to keep acknowledging that. But here's the thing. One of the really important perspectives that I invite you to consider is that, you know, when you have those negative thoughts or negative feelings, is to recognize, and here I'm borrowing from one of my teachers who I've never met. His name is Michael Singer. He's an incredible spiritual teacher and author. You can look him up. And an insight that I've gained from reading his work has really helped me on my journey. And that is, you are not the one who hears your thoughts and who says your thoughts. You are the person who hears them. I'm going to say this again. When you have a difficult thought or a difficult feeling or a negative thought, can you practice connecting to that deeper part of yourself and thinking about the fact that these thoughts that are coming, these feelings, you are witnessing them. The wiser, deeper part of you is actually witnessing. And the reason that is so powerful is that means you have a choice. That means that you have a choice. Do you follow that negative feeling? Do you allow yourself to fully experience it? Sometimes yes. Or do you say, you know, this negative thought, it is not really helpful right now. I'm just going to let it go. And that practice, this is what I do during my moments of stillness and silence. It's being able to witness the feelings and the thoughts and then connecting to that part of you to say, well, I have a choice. I have a choice of what to do. And another way to think about this is think of your feelings as information, right? Whatever you're feeling, it's giving you some kind of information about the situation, about yourself. And so it's not the end. Whatever feeling you have, it's not the end, it's the beginning. It's, okay, this is what I'm feeling. I acknowledge it, I accept it. And then maybe you ask some questions, right? What might have happened that is causing me to feel this way? What happened earlier today? Or what happened recently? And if you treat your feelings as information and approach them from a place of witnessing and learning versus judgment and harshness, that actually gives you access to a path to move through them. So those are a couple other perspectives and kind of mindset shifts that I offer for dealing with those difficult feelings.
You know, there's someone who wrote in about having difficult feelings and balancing that with gratitude and how to acknowledge your own feelings in the face of that. And it's someone who's been able to acknowledge and witness their own loneliness and stress, but they don't feel like they have it as bad as other people. And so it can make them feel like they shouldn't feel bad and they're being ungrateful for having bad feelings. Can you just say a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It's a really relevant question, I think, for so many of us. And I guess the shorthand, I want to start by asking you to not compare your struggles. You know, we all have feelings, we all have challenges, and perhaps the best way to waste emotional energy is to compare our struggles. Oh, this person has it harder. Every single one of you is a human being. Every single one of you is challenged in the situation to some degree. And so I want to offer you that the awesome human who asked this question, you said in the question that you're good about accepting your feelings. I'm actually not hearing that. I'm hearing you can validate your feelings. Accepting your feelings means you're not comparing your struggles with other people, because that just invalidates you as a human being. Accepting your feelings says, I'm a human being. This is what I feel. It's about you. It's not about comparing your struggle. It's not about feeling guilty that other people have it worse. All of that simply invalidates how you feel. And the only outcome, it doesn't make other lives people better. It does not help anyone else. It drains your limited emotional energy. It actually makes it less likely that you could help someone else, that you could show up as your best self for someone else. I want you to think about, you know, this is something that really helps me when I get into those set spaces. I have this shorthand, and if we were doing this on a stage, this would always be my last slide in any presentation, that you cannot give what you don't have. You cannot give to others what you don't have yourself. And so if you are sitting there and punishing yourself by invalidating your emotions because your struggle is not as bad as others, if you're sitting there wasting your emotional energy, you have less of that energy to bring to others. You have less to bring to your family. You have less to bring to your colleagues. You have less to bring to your community. That is the only outcome of invalidating our own feelings or comparing them, is we waste that emotional energy. And so I want you to consider flipping your perspective. The more that you can truly accept that you feel how you feel, and that it's not about comparing yourself to someone else or worse or better. It's about helping yourself optimize your emotional energy, not waste your emotional energy, so that not only do you feel better, but you can show up as best as you possibly can for all the other people that you care about. And so sitting there and invalidating ourselves is actually not in service of everyone else. It's actually indirectly hurting those people that we encounter because we show up to them as depleted self. So I really want you to think about, when you get into that headspace of you cannot give what you don't have. I can honestly tell you that is my shorthand. If I get into the guilt space, or I get into a space of like, I can't take a break right now, I gotta keep pushing, right? Like that is the shorthand. I ask myself, how do I wanna show up as a mom, as a wife, as a friend, as a colleague, as your teacher? And the answer is, if I am depleted and exhausted and beating myself up, I cannot be at my best. And so you cannot give what you don't have. That's actually, I think, a wonderful place to end. I just looked at the time. How is time moving so fast? I don't know. It's just rolling these days. So thank you all so much. I want to end with a moment of gratitude for your incredibly thoughtful questions. It means so much to me to have such thoughtful questions, to be able to answer some of them. Thank you, Debbie, for being an awesome partner in crime and facilitating. Debbie shared the links in chat, how to follow me, stay in touch on Instagram, the resource page, and other resources. And I'm just incredibly grateful for you taking this hour to be here. If you have a question that you didn't get to ask or feel uncomfortable asking, Debbie, if you would just put my email in chat. It's not always easy to ask questions. So I do read all my own emails. Obviously, it takes me some time to get through them, but if there's something you want to ask, my email is Nataly@Happier Instant Chat. So with that, I am incredibly grateful that we've had this time together. I wish you as many moments of gratitude and acceptance in these challenging weeks. And remember, you cannot give what you don't have. So the practice of your emotional health skills is not just important, but it is right now your responsibility to every single person you care about in your life. So thank you all so, so much. And I will see you hopefully on Instagram and our Wednesday webinars, and eventually somewhere in person on stage. Take good care, everyone.